PFF is running one of their biggest sales ever. 40% off a PFF Plus subscription right now using the promo code BLACKFRIDAY. That means that you get everything fully unlocked. You get the grades, you get the stats, you get all the fantasy advice, the betting advice, which our new player prop tool is available on web as well to make you a smarter, better. You've got all of the draft analysis, the free agency analysis, all of that great stuff. Subscribe.pff.com to get 40% off a year-long PFF Plus subscription. Get it now. So let's start with Sunday Night Football. Let's start with a game that was an overtime thriller. I don't know if did it technically go after midnight? I was up for it, and I know we
think so. I wasn't keeping track.
It was right up to where midnight was. If not, it was a couple minutes before, but took us in the wee hours of the night here for Sunday Night Football for the Commanders to come up one play and 1 point short in overtime. The Broncos get the win on the road, 27-26. The top 5 graded players that we have for the Denver Broncos in this one: guard Quinn Miners at the top of their list with a 92.3. Linebacker Dre Greenlaw right behind him with an 89.9. Offensive tackle Garrett Bowles with an 89.0. Edge rusher Dondre Tillman with a 85.7, and then offensive tackle Mike McGlinchey with a 79.4. Bo Nix in this game a 61.8. We'll talk a little bit more about Bo Nix in a second. On Washington side of things, their offensive lineman Sam Cosmi was their highest graded player with a 91.4. Linebacker Jordan McGee with a 79.7. Wide receiver Terry McLaurin back and healthy in this game, a 78.5. Offensive tackle Josh Connerly, a 76.9, and then offensive tackle Laramie Tunsil on the other side with a 75.4. Marcus Mariota in this game, a 62.7. Stat that told the story, Dalton. What do we got?
I think, obviously, this game was just fantastic from start to finish, right? The back-and-forth nature of it and coming down to the very last play. And there's so many things at times for the Denver Broncos this year that have felt like they're unstable, right? Bo Nix and all the close games they play in, and things can kind of be streaky for them, especially on offense. But the one bit of stability they have, and I think the one reason that they felt good about winning this game, even as it went to overtime, this is one of the best offensive lines in the NFL, and they just continue to get the job done. How about a 91.6 PFF grade as a group in this game? That's the 4th highest by any offensive line in any game this season. The pass protection was outstanding. They were only charged with 8 pressures up front in this game. All hurries. Nix, I believe, was only sacked 1 time, and that was for holding the ball too long. A 92.2 run blocking grade. I know they didn't have a ton of rushing yards, but it really wasn't on the offensive line for that. And even then, they were able to punch in the winning touchdown for R.J. Harvey in overtime there. So I just think when you look at this offensive line and the stability it allows, and the stability allows Sean Payton in the play calling as well, knowing that Bo Nix is going to be protected. And he had a 78.7 passing grade in a clean pocket, knowing that even though they've been struggling to rack up yards on the ground all night, when they need it the most down at the 5-yard line, they can still hand the ball off, get behind Garrett Bowles, get behind the rest of this offensive line, and punch it in for the winning score. This is what makes the Broncos offense the most dangerous to me, because you just don't have a whole lot of answers for a really, really good front 5. And the Commanders tried their best. There was times where they made plays and they got stops when they needed and they stayed in the game. But at the end of the day, I think this offensive line controls the pace of the offensive side of the ball for the Broncos.
Yeah, the Broncos are still on paper one of the best teams in the NFL. I think when you look at their offensive line, that's really where it starts. If Nix was going to play well, obviously, I think that you felt good about a lot of other pieces on this team. Some other wide receivers have stepped up for them. Evan Ingram was big in this game. R.J. Harvey, not a big night from him. I believe he only had 35 rushing yards in this game. But like you said, when they needed it the most, they were able to lean on him, and he was able to get in the end zone. The defense sort of speaks for itself, how they are absolute closers, and were once again in overtime on that 2-point conversion attempt with Nick Bonito getting the PBU there. So I think that the Broncos they're really strong. They're 10-2. I know that's sort of an understatement with how well they are playing and how they're right there for the number 1 seed in the AFC. When you look at Bo Nix in this game, 29 for 45, 321 passing yards, had 1 touchdown and 1 interception. When you look at some more like PFF statistics, he had 2 turnover-worthy plays, 1 big-time throw. So that's why his passing grade is a little bit lower with just a 60.3. But my stat that told the story here was Bo Nix on that final drive. 4 for 4, 71 yards. And now a big chunk of it was the Evan Ingram yards after the catch. And so obviously those are easy yards for him because he's not doing anything to pick it up. He's just giving it to Evan Ingram in a way where he can get a lot of yards after catch. But it was more of Nix and the offense in that final drive in overtime where, the Commanders elect to kick the ball, which was interesting. Chris, the boss man, said this on the broadcast. He's like, man, I would have been tempted to take the football there, because even though you're not the team answering, and there's some advantage to being able to answer because you know what you have to do after that. Do I have to kick a field goal? Do I have to score a touchdown? So you've got a good feeling of what you have to do. So I understand why you kick it, but the Broncos defense had been on the field for a while. And that game got tied up at the very end. You could send that defense right back out there again. That defense would have been tired. It would have been gassed. And who knows whether or not that would have ultimately been a better decision. But when the Broncos offense did get out there, they were ready. It just felt like completion, long yards after the catch, getting towards the goal line, punching it in. Like, it was methodical. Sean Payton was ready for that drive in overtime, and so was Bo Nix and the rest of the offense. So that, to me, was just the true stat that told the story when we had a back-and-forth game the whole time. Them being able to set the tone there right outside of overtime when they hadn't been on the field for a while obviously was what made the biggest difference for them being 1-point victors in this game.
Absolutely. I mean, and you look at what 8 of their 10 wins have been by one score. They're just used to these situations at this point. How many times have we seen, even in the 2 games they lost to the Colts and the Chargers, very, very close games, right? But this game, the Kansas City game with the big throw at the end and then the field goal to win it, beating the Raiders 10-7. It's ugly, but you just keep moving on to the next play. I think that's the idea, is that Sean Payton, look, knowing that this team, they got to the playoffs last season, they know they're trying to take the next step. They've won close games all year. I think they just have this mentality now of just keep playing. And again, that stability they have in the trenches on both sides of the ball, I really should say. Their offensive line was elite in this game, but the biggest play of the game at the end made by Nick Bonito, batting the pass down from Mariota that looked like it would have scored had he gotten it over him, right? I think you just have that level of stability in the heart and soul of this team, the offensive and defensive lines, and then Sean Payton with all of his experience just guiding his team through all of these close wins.
I know that he didn't complete that last pass, but my most impressive in this game is Marcus Mariota and how he's been able to honestly just step in for Jaden Daniels over the last couple of seasons. It's sort of been an encapsulation of him being able to step up in those big moments. There were times when, getting right down to that fourth quarter, I believe it was that final drive when they had a massive 3rd and long situation, and you go, all right, what are you going to do here, right? I mean, like, this game is basically over. And Mariota kept his composure. He completed the pass. They were able to then convert on 4th down. They end up getting the end zone. They tie the game. And it's just, they kick the field goal, and they tie the game there. And then even leading them down the field, scoring that touchdown, having a chance to win it at home in overtime. I mean, I just thought he did an excellent job. 28 for 50 overall in this game, 294 passing yards. Also had 55 rushing yards, which was the most on his team, which, I think that is an issue with the Commanders. Like, they need more rushing output from their running backs in this game. I know that who Marcus Mariota is and who Jaden Daniels is, like, the rushing ability from the quarterback position is always going to be an important part of their offense. But we have talked about, and we talked about this a lot last year as well, when this team was really rolling, running the football was a big part of their identity. Everybody loved to talk about Jaden Daniels and some of the big passes that he was able to complete, but they were able to stay really balanced last year, and when they ran the football, you felt very good about that offense. And I just feel as though the explosiveness and the rushing output and the efficiency has not quite been there this year. It obviously wasn't a major reason why they weren't competing in this game, because they were right there to the very end, but that just goes into how Marcus Mariota was able to supplement, in my opinion, a little bit of lack of explosiveness from the run game, get involved in the run game himself, and then what he did with his arm during the final couple of drives of the regulation and then into overtime, I just thought was really impressive from him.
For sure, and you can feel the difference in their offense, too. It's something I feel like they've been missing for most of the year, with Terry McLaurin, the big vertical threat out there as well, just opening things up for everybody else, and McLaurin himself had a really good game. But I just think this Commanders offense, obviously, it hasn't been all together, all in one piece, basically at all this season, and having McLaurin out there is a big difference. And honestly, as far as the game goes, it's just a game where, look, 2 teams went out there and played really hard for more than the full 60 minutes, about 68 minutes, and one team just made one more play than the other. It really was an awesome game we saw last night.
Most impressive, most disappointing?
I'll stay on that offensive line with Garrett Bowles. Look, the Broncos dropped back 48 times to pass, and Garrett Bowles only allowed 1 hurry on the night, 89.5 pass blocking grade, also an 84.5 run blocking grade with 5 positively graded run blocks. I know the rushing output doesn't look like much for the Broncos side, but their offensive line was opening holes all night, and I just think the backs really didn't take advantage of what they were given, getting yards after contact or anything like that. But Garrett Bowles was outstanding. Quinn Miners as well up front. That whole unit was, but I thought Bowles really stood out in that kind of two-dimensional way as a pass blocker and a run blocker.
My most disappointing in this game was Bobby Wagner, and Wagner's not terrible. He's still a strong presence in run defense. he is still generally where he needs to be. I think that even when he's dropping in coverage, like, you feel good about his positioning, exactly where he is. The problem is, and this got exposed specifically in that overtime period with that long catch to Evan Ingram, he just doesn't have the twitch anymore at his age. The straight line speed, okay, like he could probably get to the sideline and, pursue ball carries to the sideline and try to cut off angles with outside zone or outside toss plays or things like that. Like he can run in a straight line. But when you put him in conflict with a wide receiver or specifically a tight end like Evan Ingram, who has the ability to run sort of this pivot route or whip route the way that we saw last night in overtime, and that wasn't the only time they ran that route. I specifically went back and I saw a play earlier in the game where they actually ran that exact same route against him just to the opposite side of the field, and it was the same exact result. They cooked him. And it's just a situation where Wagner just doesn't have that agility anymore. He just does not have that lateral quickness, and that's going to be something that a lot of teams are going to be able to point to and say, we can exploit this. And the Broncos were able to do that a couple of times last night. And so for a guy who has had an unbelievable career, he's been one of the best linebackers over the last 2 decades with how he has played, Father Time has just caught up to him in that regard, and unfortunately we saw it in overtime for them.
Yeah, and he's still got the 7th best run defense grade among qualified linebackers in the NFL, but only a 51.3 coverage grade for the season. And if you're going to have a player like that, then you need your other linebackers, say, right, as I've talked before about Dre Greenlaw kind of being that complement on this, really on the, right on the other side here with Denver, of being that guy who can cover at that linebacker position. The problem is Frankie Louvu's not great in coverage either. He's only got a 50 coverage grade himself. So it is something, I think, going into next year that Dan Quinn is going to have to think about, finding somebody who can cover at that first level, at that linebacker spot, whether it's someone who's just a really good athlete who can rotate in, or maybe finding a new starter and really turning over a new leaf with this linebacking core.